Geometry Dash GFX are forms of artwork in the community, mainly for profile pictures or thumbnails. Even I have one of these profile pictures as my logo. These famous GFX pieces that are associated with some of the most popular Geometry Dash players have changed over time. In this video, I will be going over how I noticed these change in style for these Geometry Dash GFX. Now, let's get into this. Back in the early versions of the game, there were not many famous players due to how little the game was, and the most popular Geometry Dash players would not come around until later in the game's life, as more and more players were introduced to the game. Soon, some Geometry Dash players would create social medias to share their creations or achievements. These players needed some artwork to represent themselves, and some of the earliest Geometry Dash GFX were very similar to the Geometry Dash logo, as these early GFX contained a background, a border, a cube, and the Geometry Dash logo itself had all these features too. It seems as if these early Geometry Dash GFX were inspired by the game's logo, and this is most likely the case. Even my logo can trace its roots back to these early Geometry Dash GFX works. These artworks also contain the player's in-game icon, and this is a trend that still continues to this day. Players tend to choose an icon that represents them, and this icon is seen in all of their social media logos and thumbnails. Later on, as the game would get more popular, Geometry Dash GFX started to become recognizable, as more and more famous players started using it. Suddenly, a lot of the big players at the time had these profile pictures for themselves. These GFX pieces were improving. Artists started adding a ton of effects to make these profile pictures more interesting. Not only this, but people started adding bevel and other details to even more exaggerate these artworks. People also started adding text to these logos. Not just a letter on the border, but the player's name would appear on their GFX. This would be useful as now many people could tell who the GFX was meant for. Eventually, Geometry Dash GFX for profile pictures split and went down two directions. Some GFX stuck with the old style inspired by the game's logo, while others went down a more original path. The ones that stayed true to the original began getting more clean and less random, while the older ones tended to add too many unorganized effects. However, new artworks were being made. Some profile pictures consisted of just the player's icon with some effects. Some others also went down a more animated look that was more clean looking. Either way, these were not like the original GFX pieces back in the early versions of the game. These Geometry Dash GFX trends also applied to other forms of artwork like thumbnails. Early Geometry Dash video thumbnails tend to not have a lot going on. Later on, these thumbnails would have unorganized effects, and more recent ones would have more cleaner effects. Geometry Dash GFX has definitely evolved over time, and I personally prefer the newer, more clean-looking GFX nowadays. Most of these artworks are used by some of the most famous players in the game, so it is nice to trace its roots back to when the community was just getting into the idea of making Geometry Dash GFX. Thanks for watching this video. Have a good day.